Today, we're going to break down the events of September 11th, 2001. We're going to distill one of the most pivotal and, frankly, heartbreaking days in modern history, looking directly at our source material to really understand not just what happened, but how it happened.
Discover the truth about the biggest religious controversy of the 21st century. From Islam's rapid growth to Christianity's shifting demographics, we explore the fascinating facts and figures behind the world's most popular religions. Watch now and stay informed! Like, comment, and subscribe for more thought-provoking content.
Subscribe to the Hub of Crime Analysis.
Today, we're going to break down the events of September 11th, 2001. We're going to distill one of the most pivotal and, frankly, heartbreaking days in modern history, looking directly at our source material to really understand not just what happened, but how it happened.
And right off the bat, the title of our source document is pretty provocative. It frames this entire event not just as an act of terrorism, but as a profound manipulation, a con, as they call it, all carried out in the name of ideology. And that perspective, that idea of a con, is going to be central to everything we talk about today.
So let's go back to that morning. It's a Tuesday. Across the entire eastern United States, and especially in New York City, the day starts with this absolutely beautiful, crystal clear weather. Air traffic controllers were literally calling it severe clear. It was just a deceptively normal, perfect morning that gave absolutely no hint of the horror that was about to unfold.
Okay, so how did this so-called con actually work? Let's break down who the perpetrators were and the mechanics of their plan, which you'll see was shockingly simple, but designed for the most devastating impact imaginable.
Think about this for a second. The entire operation, an attack that would literally change the course of history, was carried out by just 19 men, a tiny, strategically placed group that was tasked with executing this massive, world-altering attack.
And their weapons? Well, they weren't bombs or missiles in the traditional sense. They were 4 commercial airliners, each one filled with unsuspecting passengers on long flights, which they planned to turn into fully fueled, guided missiles.
And this is where the simplicity of it all becomes just chilling. The physical weapons they brought on board weren't guns. They were box cutters, the kind with blades less than 4 inches long, and mace. And the craziest part? At the time, those items were actually permitted through airport security.
So who is the mastermind behind this? Osama bin Laden. The source describes him as the son of an incredibly wealthy Saudi construction magnate. But unlike his siblings, he chose this radical path. His stated goal was to force Western influence, especially the US military, out of what he called the Holy Lands of Islam.
So who were these 19 men, really? Well, they were young, and some of them, like the ringleader Mohammed Atta, were actually university educated. The source suggests this common thread running through them, a deep sense of societal discontent mixed with this manipulated, twisted promise of an eternal paradise. It's just a powerful, and as we saw, an absolutely deadly combination.
And their teams were set up in a really simple but brutally effective way. Each of the 4 teams had 2 basic roles. First, a pilot hijacker, someone who had actually trained at flight schools right here in America. And then you had the muscle hijackers. The source is clear, these guys weren't necessarily big, imposing figures. They were just trained to be ruthless and effective with small knives to overpower the flight crew.
All right, so we have the plan, we have the people. Now let's walk through the actual timeline of how these attacks unfolded across that clear morning sky.
The speed of this assault was just staggering. It was rapid fire. At 8:46 a.m., boom, the first plane hits the North Tower. Just 17 minutes later, at 9:03, the second plane strikes the South Tower. Then, at 9:37, a third plane smashes into the Pentagon. All of this happened in less than an hour, throwing the entire country into absolute chaos and disbelief.
You know, to really understand what it was like inside those planes, we have the words of heroes like Flight Attendant Betty Ong on that first flight. In her calm, professional call to the ground, she relayed these critical details, all while she was struggling to breathe because of the mace.
Her unbelievable bravery gave the world its very first window into the horror that was happening. What's just so uniquely terrifying about that second attack is what the passengers saw. As they were flying towards Manhattan, people on the left side of United Flight 175 could actually look out their windows and see the North Tower, already burning. They knew. The source reports you could just hear shouts of, "Oh my God," as they realized what was about to happen to them.
And you know, the exact point of impact on the towers made a world of difference. Flight 11 hit the North Tower way up high, completely cutting off any chance of escape for everyone trapped above. But Flight 175 hit the South Tower lower down, and in what our source calls a miracle, really, one of the 3 main stairwells was somehow spared, giving a small number of people above the impact zone a fighting chance to get out.
But amidst all this tragedy, this horror, there is this one incredible story of pure defiance. And that brings us to the 4th plane, United Flight 93, and the extraordinary actions of its passengers and crew. I mean, really think about this question. Put yourself in their shoes. What would you do? They were faced with a choice that no person should ever have to make. And they made that choice together. So what was the crucial difference for Flight 93? Information. Because their hijacking happened later, passengers were able to make cell phone calls to their loved ones on the ground. And through those calls, they learned about the other attacks. They knew this wasn't a normal hijacking for ransom. They knew it was a suicide mission. And what they did with that information is just astounding. They got the news, they understood the stakes, and then they took a vote. Can you imagine that? A democratic decision made under the most unimaginable pressure. And then, passengers like Todd Beamer and others led a charge to try and retake that cockpit. Now, they didn't succeed in saving themselves, but make no mistake, they absolutely succeeded in their mission. The plane went down in an empty field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Our source, citing expert analysis, confirms their heroic act prevented those hijackers from hitting their intended target, which all evidence points to being the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C.
So the immediate attacks were over in a matter of hours, but the aftermath, the legacy of this so-called con was just beginning, and it left a deep scar on the world. In the hours that followed, the Twin Towers, these massive symbols of American economic power, just collapsed into dust. The country was left completely reeling, and the hunt for Osama bin Laden began, a hunt that, as the source notes, would go on for nearly 10 years. But beyond all the physical destruction, our source argues that the most profound impact was really psychological. It left what it calls a permanent scar on the collective conscience of the United States, changing the country in ways that we still feel every single day.
And the source broadens the scope of this tragedy too, pointing out how this massive con didn't just harm the direct victims, it also scarred the families of the young men who were manipulated into doing this, and it casts this long, unfair shadow over countless innocent Muslims around the world who despise this kind of violence. So in the end, we're left with this idea of the event as a manipulative con that left a permanent scar. And it leaves us with this really difficult question, doesn't it? How does a nation's conscience, and really the world's conscience, even begin to heal from something like that?